All right.
Javier, you look
Javi,
you,
appreciate you hopping on here with us and kind of sharing your knowledge and your experience so far at Baylor after moving on from Fairmont. Definitely got a bunch of questions for you. I don't know if we'll get to all of them. We've kind of, the first three that we've done, we've kind of got to hit most of the questions I have, but definitely not all of them. So we'll kind of just see how the conversation goes. So the first thing is just giving us kind of an update what your title is, what your role is, and what kind of your weekly and daily responsibilities are at Baylor.
No, absolutely. So, if you guys don't know, my name is Javier Salas. I am the Athletic Performance Fellowship Coach over at Baylor University. And basically, I'm kind of part-time. And basically, kind of my roles there is be a bullpen coach. So, usually like demoing, setting up, breaking down, really simple stuff. And then I kind of also have I guess, second kind of opportunity to be doing some of the admin stuff. So, like, I organize kind of all of our lifting cards, I'll contact, facilities when needed. I'll communicate with the football staff and sometimes the athletic trainers and all that. So, just a little bit of everything besides probably the actual programming and, being the sole responsibility of one team. But I think we'll get into that kind of later.
Actually, we can kind of get into that right now, real
Yeah.
quick. Like,
Okay.
what teams
Yeah.
do you work? What teams do you work with on a daily basis? And like at least I know sometimes you see some like you'll randomly see some different teams and stuff as we've talked about. What teams are you kind of working with the most? And kind of what does your normal week look like?
Yeah.
At
So,
least in the fall, how it was in the fall.
yeah. So I kind of fill in wherever I'm needed. They kind of tell me where to go at some points during the semester, but mainly I work with equestrian, and I'm usually there at the football facility probably at like 4:45 in the morning to get set up and break down. We usually go for like an hour and a half, so I'm usually with them, and usually after that we usually have some sort of like team meeting. Was like that like twice a week, usually for professional development or just kind of checking in with everybody, seeing how things are going. And then from there, I'll have a nice break until about 2:45, and then I work with track and field, and that is every day. That is Monday through Friday. We have everybody comes in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesdays is just pole vaulters. And so that could definitely get a little hectic. We go that for 2 hours, and then after that, from about 5:30 to 7, we have acrobatics and tumbling, and so we'll do that for that hour and a half. Finish up at 7, call it quits there, and then I'll usually head home and start that all over again. So it's definitely a busy schedule. And then from time to time in there, I also fit in baseball. Um, Try to fit in. They're pretty scattered throughout the day. Unfortunately, they never really have like a set time, and so there's more kind of an open gym. They'll have 3 or 4 hours every day. They'll split it between pitchers and position players, and so they'll just kind of come in sporadically, and then whenever Coach Bo, the strength conditioning coach for them, I'll kind of help come in and help out with that.
Okay. So are you guys? I know I've asked you this before, and I can't remember what you told me. Are you guys using the football weight room, the main weight room there, or is there like how many weight rooms are on campus, and which one are you guys using?
So we have three weight rooms on campus. Um, we have the Williams Center, which is located by the soccer fields. It basically the majority of the smaller or medium-sized Olympic sports, they'll go there. So soccer, baseball, softball. Um, I'm trying to think who else goes there right now. But basically the smaller kind of Olympic sports. And then there's the Farrell Center, which is in now, I guess, the old basketball stadium and or the old basketball arena, and that does men's and women's basketball as well as the volleyball team. So all three of them will go there. And then the football weight room, it'll be A&T, equestrian, and then football as well. So they're not too far apart from each other, but there's definitely some negotiating and whole lot of communication between sport coaches and other strength coaches to kind of get time and kind of allocate resources. Um, So on the staff, we have, I believe, 7 Olympic athletic performance coaches, including me. And then we have a athletic performance coach for women's basketball and men's basketball. And then we have 5 football athletic performance coaches. So a lot of communication between everybody, especially when it's the Farrell Center and right now it's men's and women's basketball season, and then you're trying to compute with or communicate with the volleyball athletic performance coach. And so unfortunately, I haven't really gotten to meet the basketball athletic performance coaches yet. So I know for some of these other guys, it could be, kind of difficult to get a hold of them, and their schedules are definitely different.
So you mentioned the schedule. Does football then, like after equestrian finishes, is that when football comes in and rolls through their training sessions like during the season?
Yeah. So basically, we use this app like called Team Up, and basically it's the whole calendar. It's like what you guys have with your Google Sheet, just instead it's a little bit, it's an app now. But so yeah, usually on Mondays we'll help set up whatever they need next, and just kind of get them right rolling into it. We won't, run the session or anything, but we'll just kind of help out and set up everything, make it easier for them. And then in the fall, Wednesdays and Thursdays, we wouldn't interfere with anything, so we didn't really have to help them there. But this coming spring, it's gonna be their off season, and so like we'll kind of see how things go. I know we're gonna have to kind of move out of the football weight room for a couple days or a day or two, so it's supposed to be a little bit more chaotic this spring semester.
I got you. Um, so just kind of give us like an update on and kind of just I don't know what you want to call it, like your Cliff Notes version of what you mentioned the staff a little bit, and just kind of what that hierarchy is and how everybody kind of, you know, what the communication needs to look like, who kind of like runs the show to an extent, and then kind of tie that into like what the overarching standards are across the board for all the coaches. Is there certain rules in the weight room that every coach has to follow, every athlete has to follow? Is it kind of just up to that strength coach, in terms of like their standards and expectations for their individual teams, and just kind of how that gets navigated?
Absolutely. So basically, the main guy that runs the whole show is the director of athletic performance, uh, Christopher Roof. He's one of the OGs. He was one of the first to be part of the CSCCA. If you don't know, is the College Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. I'm sure we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But he's been there for 20 years. Started with football, really started kind of the whole athletic performance program at Baylor, and kind of branched out from football to all the other sports, and kind of really like advocated for all the like sports psych and athletic training and nutrition, and really kind of, this is his baby, like this is his, what he's been doing. And so he's kind of the overarching guy. Now he just does track and field. He is just in charge of them, and then he'll assist with acro and tumbling. But he's the main guy, and then he'll kind of oversee. He won't be a part of football, but I know he's part of kind of like the hiring process there. I know because it doesn't really want to deal with anything there, but we have those strength coaches there, and then obviously he'll help out with the men's and women's basketball coaches, hiring them. But the main people that I work with, so we have a baseball strength and conditioning coach, just does them, uh, Mr. Bo Holland, and then we have Mr. Cole Durham, who does both the tennis teams. Uh, Mallory Henderlong, who does women's soccer. Um, Michael Winger, that does volleyball and softball. Haley Hudson, that does equestrian. Courtney Tompkins, she does acro and tumbling. I think I hit everybody. Yeah, that's 6, including me is 7. And so basically, those are the teams that they run. And then also, there'll be basically a bullpen coach where they come in and kind of help out with maybe some of the bigger teams, um, especially like a baseball. Usually, me and Coach Durham are there, maybe an intern or two, because I can kind of get to, depending on the day. Again, that can get messy. But yeah, we just kind of bounce around, and I mean, communication's a big thing. We're constantly emailing each other. We have, our our kind of like group chat or email chain on Outlook. We're constantly calling each other, seeing what we need. We have our own, we're texting each other, calling each other, whatever we need to do to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. Because, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with asking a million questions, as you'll kind of see, and just making sure everything is organized. And part of that too is we're very fortunate that we get to have two team meetings every single Tuesday and Thursday, basically this semester, and talk about things like as a staff. Like one of our big things this past week before we all went on break was the spring semester schedule. And it absolutely stinks because we have to talk to sport coaches, and then sometimes we have to talk to Olympic sport coaches, football, and like I was saying, the basketball strength coaches, kind of coordinate that to try to get our time that we want, and also that the time that the sport coaches want. And so you're definitely kind of at the mercy of a lot of people. And so it was very nice kind of just sit there for a week. And obviously I don't have to do anything. They just tell me, hey, show up this time. But for them, like basically we just sat there for an hour and hashed it out on what we need to do. And we kind of have a skeleton now of what the spring semester is going to look like. And then hopefully, when we kind of get back in the third, we'll be able to kind of finalize something, and everyone will, fingers crossed, be semi-satisfied. It's never usually how it works, but I mean, just to be able to sit down and like, everyone's very proactive when it kind of comes to that. So, um, but it's kind of as far as our kind of standards that we have. I mean, we we have a nice. And I'll probably send a picture or something to you, Adam. But we have a very nice kind of I don't know which one you call it, plaque or pillar of basically what our principles are, which is always communicate, be relentless, be disciplined. The golden rule, which is always treat others how you want to be treated. And so we kind of base kind of our coaching off that, and preaching that, basically to ourselves every day, holding each other accountable, and as well as our athletes, and kind of going over everything throughout the semester. So it's just a constant message that we kind of tell each other and tell the athletes. I mean, it's it's nothing special, but I mean, having a clear message and having that kind of culture, in your program, it makes a world of difference. I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
And I think that's good. I think it's even good to just to have that
Yeah.
posted somewhere so that everybody can see it and everybody knows what the expectations are. And it's something that obviously, like, when we've had staff meetings while you were here, and then obviously now with the staff that I have now, it's just like, you mentioned the golden rule. Like, I kind of think that there's like a strength coach golden rule of like, coach. And I say that you guys have all heard me say this, like, coach the athletes the way that you would want to be coached. Like, if you don't like somebody screaming in your face, then you probably don't want to be screaming in somebody else's face. But there are people that do respond well to that. Like, a certain minority of athletes like that. So it's one of those things where sometimes you might have to, you know, adapt to that situation and coach people the way that they want to also be coached to an extent as well. So it's kind of just, again, being adaptable and communicating and kind of everybody being on the same page. So you mentioned the CSCCA. I didn't have this on my normal questions, but I have it as a note here.
Yeah.
So are you going to be able to qualify to sit for that certification then by the time you're done this?
So yes, that's part of my, as you'd say, fellowship role. As part of the description, where basically, if you don't know, CSCCA offers a certification called the SCCC, which is the strength coaches.
Certification collegiate or
Cer-
something like that.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, yeah, I completely forgot. But basically, it is this big book similar to your CSCS Essentials book, um, and basically it's a little bit more rigorous when it comes to qualifying for the test. So you need to have 640 hours under a master strength coach. And a master strength coach is someone who's had their SCCC for, I believe it's 4 years. And you go and you do your internship under them. And then, and my mentor is Michael Winger, great guy. He's been helping me out a lot. But I have to do 640 hours basically reporting to him, and then there is a written test. It's about 100 questions. There's only one section. Uh, Basically, it's very similar to the CSCS. Some people have said it's harder. Some people said it's easier. Um, Reading the book, I mean, it's the exact same material. It's not too bad in my opinion. But then you also have to send in a program, and then you will also be asked. So there will also be a practical section where you have to go to the conference, and you'll be sitting in front of a panel of three master strength coaches, and you will demo a squat, bench, and clean. And then after that, you will defend your program that you kind of submitted beforehand. So definitely a longer process, but um, it's a great opportunity, and it's another great certification that you can get. And so I would suggest to you guys, if you ever have an opportunity, definitely pursue it.
Yeah, and it's something that obviously most of the time, kind of your golden ticket, at least in the most situations for strength and conditioning, is your CSCS. But there are some places, especially working with football, where the CSCCA is a little bit more held in high regard, mainly because of that practical aspect where you have to write a year-long training program. You have to take it in front of that committee, present it, defend it, demonstrate aspects of it, whatever it may be. And then obviously the actual required hours, which again, that's something that, this is why internships are so important, because of the fact that like you can go take your CSCS and it doesn't mean that you have any clue how to coach versus the way the CSCCA kind of does it is having to have those shadowing hours, internship hours, mentorship hours, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But a lot it forces you to get those hours and those required hours. For somebody like in my situation, because when I was at WVU, I would have qualified for it, but obviously I was only there for 4 months, so it wasn't enough hours. Um, so actually, I've actually been looking into it over the last, I don't know, off and on for the last year. If you're a full-time strength coach, like in my situation, and you're like the head person and you don't have somebody to like that you're working under, you basically, once you get to 3 years of being a collegiate strength coach full time, which my time will be up here in February of 3 years, um, then I can actually reach out to the CSCCA and they will put me in touch with a mentor, somebody locally. So probably Tanner at WVU or Mike Joseph at WVU. And then basically I do all the same stuff. I would basically take the exam, submit the training program, and then go in front of the committee and defend it, if that's something I end up pursuing. But just to kind of give you guys an example, because you
Yeah.
may see that sometimes if you're applying for a job, you may see that they want your CSCS or your SCCC. It'll be an and or one of those options. So just for that's a good kind of teaching moment there for everybody on that. So you mentioned the standards. I did have this as a question because it's always kind of interesting to me. Like, it used to be that the strength coaches were also like the team disciplinarians. Like if a kid shows up for a football meeting late or, misses basketball practice or misses study hall, the strength coaches have to do all the punishment conditioning and all that stuff. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of that. I think that that's not really what our jobs are supposed to be. Traditionally, that's kind of where we did have a role, but I personally don't think that should be the case. What kind of like issues have you guys had? Obviously you don't have to name specifics or get real detailed with it, but what kind of issues maybe have you guys had in the weight room at Baylor, if any? And then like how do you guys as a strength coach handle weight room discipline issues? And then is there any times where the strength coach are handling like team discipline issues?
Um, we really haven't had too many problems with athletes. I think just like all teams and all places, you every once in a while you get a kid that comes in late, and they'll just straight up tell you, "Hey, coach, like, sorry, I slept in," and it's like, all right, we had some sort of punishment after practice or after the lift where it was like, hey, you got 20 yards of pencil rules, you got bear crawls to here, and then I forget what else we did. We did something else. But we typically don't have a problem with that, and the sport coaches don't really um, like make us do any of that, which is definitely nice. I've seen football do it, though. They kind of have their kids that didn't lift that day or who didn't lift. They come in like right after a A&T session, and it's like, oh yeah, like you guys are the guys that messed up, and pretty easy to tell. And so it's not a good 7 p.m. lift for them, but we don't you know have that typical issue, and we're very fortunate we don't kind of have to deal with that on top of the other things that we have. So
Yeah, I'm not surprised with the teams especially the teams that you're working
yeah.
with. Like none of those teams really would stand out to me as a team that would have a lot of issues. I'll just kind of something that, again, another note that I wrote down. um, so you mentioned the different teams that you're assisting with. What's maybe some of the similarities? Like, is there, as again going back to kind of that just the standards expectation that Baylor has? Like, is everybody very Olympic weightlifting based? Is there a speed component to everybody's training session? Is there, the fundamental human movements like push, pull, squat, loaded carry, that kind of stuff? Like, and then so what similarities are you seeing across the board with all the teams? And then what are some of the biggest differences? Like, I know we've talked before, A&T is big, Olympic lifting, track and field's big, Olympic weightlifting. Um, what about like, difference between them and maybe baseball and what maybe equestrian are doing, in terms of just like from a big rock standpoint, I guess, like big training differences and similarities.
No, and there's not too much difference. I would say, they follow all the same human movement patterns. And I would also say, I mean, there hasn't really been an exercise here at Baylor or some sort of secret sauce here that's completely different than what you guys do at Fairmont. I mean, there's a few movements that maybe they're a step more advanced or they're a step further. Um, just because we have an athlete or two that's just such a freak, it's like, okay, what can we do to make this at least a little bit hard for them? But I mean, for the most part, it's fundamental human movements. Equestrian, they do not Olympic lift. We do, I mean, our main pillars there are like squat, bench, and then we'll do some sort of like unilateral squat, whether it's like a step down or some sort of split squat. And then for them, it's just kind of monitoring them and keeping them healthy for the season. And then also, so oh, somebody left. We'll have 2 days of lifting and then 1 day of kind of conditioning, basically out on the football field. And so there, kind of before we start our conditioning session, we'll run through kind of like some linear speed drills, high knees, kind of some band resisted long jump or broad jump, excuse me, and just kind of go through some similar stuff there that we did at Fairmont or that you guys are probably doing right now with some of your field sports. And then baseball, baseball doesn't really do a whole lot of Olympic lifting. We'll do some like snatch grip RDLs, but that's about it. We won't really kind of go delve deep into that. But they sprint basically, I want to say twice a week. Unfortunately, I wasn't really there to see it. It usually goes on around the time that track and field's lifting. So I haven't gone out to the field to see it, but I know they do that. And they're very similar to our team. I mean, they do squat, bench, and then also do straight bar deadlift and trap bar deadlift, kind of alternating throughout the out the year. And then track and field and probably acro and tumbling are very, very similar. Um, both are going to snatch, both are going to squat, both are going to clean and jerk. So those are kind of those three main exercises. I mean, their lifts for the most part are pretty similar. I would say acro is a little bit more, since it's a little bit longer, they incorporate a little bit more of the plyos side of it at the beginning of each session and just kind of branch out from there. But yeah, so every team's a little bit different, but I wouldn't say, anything's groundbreaking or anything kind of has blown my mind just yet. Kind of all on that.
With baseball, are they doing um, like other exercises that kind of supplement or take place of some of their Olympic lifts? Are they doing any type of loaded jumps, any type of like a lot of plyometrics, med ball throws, med ball overhead, like overhead throws, rotational throws,
Hmm.
um, landmine exercises, or things like that? Like, what kind of other maybe variations are they throwing in to kind of replace, if you can, I guess you could say that, replace some of their Olympic
Yeah.
lifting movements?
No, kind of throughout the semester, just kind of seeing them go from like doing some med ball work all the way to kind of some landmine throws, and then they'll do kind of like dumbbell jumps. They'll do band assisted jumps. So definitely kind of just trying to make up as much as we can for power development and instead of those Olympic lifts. But I mean, but again, unfortunately, I wasn't there every single day, so I couldn't kind of be around the program the entire time that I wanted. But I mean, they're I mean, for the most part, like I said, they're sprinting, they're jumping, they're throwing. So no, but yeah, good program.
So you mentioned that you don't really get to you're not writing programs, like fully writing. Are you getting to assist with any of the writing of the programs? Are you getting? Is there any time that they're asking for input with you? And then to kind of take that question, once you answer that, like to kind of follow a little further up with that, like when they're writing programs and they're prescribing training loads, are they? I know you guys have Perch. I know you guys have some other sports science. Probably have velocity-based devices. I'm assuming. What's kind of the breakdown of what most teams are doing, or what all the teams are doing in terms of like prescribing training loads? Is it all percentage based? Is it velocity based? Is it, what kind of, I guess, methodologies are you guys using in terms of just how you're prescribing training loads, and then how much are you actually getting to factor into that?
Yeah. So yeah, I do not program. I'll give a little bit input every now and then, especially with equestrian and kind of A&T. But for the most part, I mean, track and field, I mean, that's kind of Coach Roof's kind of his baby. I mean, so he's got that locked down. And then obviously, I'm not as consistent with baseball, and Coach Bo, I mean, he's got that for the most part. Um, but I'll have a little bit input here and there, and constantly after every single lifting session, we'll kind of have a debrief or going into a new block, we'll kind of talk a little bit. But but yeah, for the most part, I mean, that's all on the kind of designated coach. And then as far as kind of like programming goes, I don't know if you guys see it, but it's not loading. They use the system, which I've been reading. Great book. It's about the Soviet periodization and how they kind of translated it more for an American strength coach. And basically, it's just kind of weekly undulating periodization. And they kind of basically base it off, the intensity is based off volume. It could be off your 1 rep percentage max or kind of predicted percentage max. And so that's like a really, really brief rundown. And there's definitely more to it. Suggest that you guys read it. But I mean, they're constantly working off kind of well, for some of us, it is their 1 rep maxed. The last week before we went on break, I mean, we maxed out on cleans and back squat for both our track and acro and tumbling team. So I mean, we're getting some absolute numbers there that we're working with, and then depending on the team, I know kind of Coach Roof, he'll kind of dial it back. He'll do like 0.95 or kind of round down or whatever he kind of needs to do. So it's just different per coach. And I know baseball, they never really max out. They'll get into that 90, 92.5, 95 kind of 3 rep max range, and they'll kind of go from there. Um, but yeah, I mean the programming's pretty simple. I wouldn't say it's anything crazy. And then everything's just kind of handled block by block and seeing how the athletes go and seeing what's working and not working and what sport coaches are saying and what they kind of like. And don't think I've mentioned this, but every single session, basically, there's an athletic trainer there, there's a sport coach there, and usually like the dietitian is there pretty much every single time too. So I mean, there's constantly eyes on there, and so sport coaches, I mean, they're getting a real sense of what's going on in the weight room, basically every.
Kind of broke up there at the very
And
end on the
oh,
last thing you said. You were
you hear
saying
me
that.
all right?
Yeah, we can hear you better.
Yeah,
Just repeat that last like sentence again.
yeah. Sorry, guys. Oh, okay.
Um,
Sorry, it's raining here in Phoenix for like, you know, one of the 10 times a year. But just kind of saying how like when we're during a lift, basically the entire like sports staff is there. They don't really coach or anything like that, but like there's assistant coaches, there's head coaches, there's athletic trainers, there's dietitians, there's a director of ops that's usually there for every single team. I mean, across the board. I mean, you're definitely going to have more than just the strength coaches there. So a lot of eyes.
okay. Um, I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna come back and ask you again about the technology and stuff that you guys are using, because I mentioned about like if you guys were using like velocity based
Yeah.
stuff or something like that, like with perch and all that. But you said weekly undulating periodization or daily from the
Weekly.
weekly. Okay. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
everybody's familiar with that, but basically, I mean, Javi, you can maybe give us an example of something that you guys have done there. But basically, it's just you're fluctuating the percentages, the training percentages, the RPE, the load, whatever you want to call it, every single week. So you're kind of having like a high week, a low week, a medium week, a high week, something like that. At least from a weekly standpoint, and you can do daily undulating, you can do weekly, you can do block, like traditional block would be like, 1 week, 1 month at a time would be a certain kind of percentage range. But can you give us maybe an example of like, and also actually answer this too, because I was going to ask you this. When you say 1 rep max for clean and jerk and back squat, is that until an athlete misses, or is that based off of a bar speed and they call it quits, or is it like how are you guys actually determining it? Was it literally just here's the heaviest weight that you could clean and jerk without missing, or did they kind of just have hard cutoffs at certain like technique issues or bar speeds, and then tie that back to the undulating periodization if you can.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with your second question. Um, so yeah, basically, I mean, for our cleans, especially for our track team, I mean, we had several athletes that basically went until failure, and even to the point where they're like, "Hey, coach, like I can hit this, like I can hit this, like let me go, a second, a third, a fourth time." I'm like, "Dude, fine. If it gets you to be quiet, that's fine." And of course, they hit it that third time or that fourth time that you actually give them a chance. And so, I mean, it's just kind of at the coach's discretion, how much we're going to go up, how much do we kind of need. And so, I mean, but definitely for both, the teams that we tested the cleans on, I mean, they were going until they missed, basically. And then as far as squats going, I mean, again, that's up to kind of the coach's discretion. Basically that day, every every set past your second set is a coach's set. So you got to get eyes on them. And fortunate for us, there's three strength coaches and two interns. So I mean, we got a lot of eyes on the floor. So it's kind of very convenient for us to kind of go around and make sure we're seeing everybody. And so, I mean, as far as squad, I mean, we definitely went until a few kids failed, and some others it was pretty close. But just like the cleans, I mean, we had some athletes they would miss their first squat. They'd be like, "Hey, coach, like I can do it. Like I could do it. Like I could do it. Like it's in the bag." I'm like, "Are you sure? Like that last rep looked pretty ugly," and they're like, "Yep, yep, I got it. I got it." And so, I'm like, all right, there we go, underneath the bar again, and sure enough, perfect squat, down and up, no problem. Could have probably repped out two more, and so, but obviously you call it quits after that because you can only handle so many heart attacks in a day. So, but yeah, no, some pretty crazy max out days. But yeah, I mean, it's under the coach's discretion, and I mean, you're talking with the athlete, especially some of these upperclassmen who have been training 4 years consistently. I mean, they know their body pretty well, and they know kind of the coaches pretty well. So I mean, it just kind of comes down to a conversation between you and them on what to kind of do. But tying that back to kind of periodization. So basically, probably the best example of this is probably with track and field, where they'll start out with kind of like a medium week. Well, they'll have maybe more. Um, dang so they'll have like their medium week, which is like their 80%, kind of 80, 85. Then they'll kind of go to a medium light, which is like 75%. And then they'll go back up to a high, which is like, depending on the time of year, anywhere from like 87.5% all the way up to like a 92, 95% of their 1 rep max, whatever we're doing there. And then after that, they'll kind of have like a deload where it's at, 70%. And so, kind of like an example would be when we were kind of leading up to that 1 rep max, we were doing, let's see, for our cleans, every single Monday, we started out at 9 sets for 1 week, and then we did 10 and then 11 for that week that we did for our 1 rep max. And basically that was the day. We maybe had two other exercises that we did beforehand, and then we had our 10 or 11 sets of cleans that we did. And then we maybe had like a couple mobility stuff and like a core exercise right after that, and that was the day. So I mean, it definitely changes though, team by team and week by week. So it's kind of where we're at. Also, I mean, track and field does lift 4 days a week. So some of these teams like them, I mean, their lifts will be a little bit smaller, um, because they can make up for it throughout the entire week with some other exercises. So that's one thing I probably should also mention.
Yeah, I think track and field's always one of those sports. Again, I've never really got to work with them at all, but I think they're a sport that I'm super intrigued in just because of the fact that, other than maybe Olympic weightlifting, like track and field are one of the very few sports that you can make the argument that something you're doing in the weight room and or something specifically that you're doing in practice is actually causing a change, whether it's a decrease in time or increase in time or an increase in distance or an increase in weight versus, if you go from cleaning whatever 185 to 225, it doesn't mean you're going to have more tackles on a football team. It doesn't mean that you're going to throw the baseball harder or have a higher batting average. Like there's no correlation at all. Versus track and field, if your clean goes from 185 to 225, there's a potential, a more likelihood, a more of a correlation, causation potentially that your 100-meter dash time goes down. So um, I still do want to come back to the perch and like force decks and Nord boards and whatever
Yeah.
other sports
No, I was
science
going to
stuff
mention that. Yeah.
you you guys are using. But let me ask you that kind of on a track question because obviously I know you have a history of working with track and doing track yourself. Like how much communication, at least from what you've seen with Coach Roof and the track coach, like how much communication are they having, or do they need to be having to where the track coach and what we're doing in the weight room or track practice what we're doing in the weight room isn't like opposite ends of the spectrum. Like is it something where they're trying to have, their high days on the same days, like a high speed day is also going to be a high weightlifting day, or do they try to fluctuate that? Like are they undulating their track practices the way that you guys are undulating stuff in the weight room? Like is that something that you've seen or that you've heard people talk about? Like what's kind of your opinions on that and experience with that?
No, so yeah, they're pretty much in constant communication. They have a pretty good relationship. Coach Ford, the head track coach, he's in charge of sprints. I mean, he's been there for a pretty long time now, ever since Mr. Clyde Hart decided to retire. So, and obviously Coach Ruth's been there, so they have a pretty good relationship. They're same thing. I feel like with every kind of straight program nowadays, where you want to stack those kind of hard days. So I mean, when they have some brutal sprint workouts on Tuesday. We're also doing a ton of cleans on that day, so we're kind of stacking those kind of high intensity days together. But at the same time too, we're in constant communication. Like, hey, like how are the athletes feeling today? Hey, this is a rough week. This is a bad week. Like in the middle of the semester, we switched from early morning practices because of the heat that was going on to now we're all in the afternoon. So it's just kind of constantly communicating with that. That transition was definitely a little bit rough for some of the athletes. Pretty noticeable decline there. But I mean, it's staying in communication and then kind of going off a little bit of that. Um, every single sport basically has a care team meeting, which is that can happen anywhere from once a week to once every other week. And basically, that is the strength coach, assistant coaches, sport coach, dietitian, sports psych, athletic trainer, kind of basically everybody involved in that team will kind of get together and sit down anywhere between half hour all the way up to sometimes 2 hours depending on the team, and they'll kind of talk about what's going on. So I'd probably say everyone's pretty good about that and communicating. So, but obviously when they have the time to do it in the middle of the day, so I mean it's a great kind of opportunity for everyone. I haven't been able to sit in a ton of those meetings. I maybe got to sit in like one equestrian one. That was about 30 minutes, and everyone just kind of said everybody's doing well, and that was it. Um, but yeah, I mean, all teams across the board have scheduled times to kind of communicate with the entire kind of sports management team, I guess, if you want to say it. Um, and then also one of the other things I kind of wanted to mention, kind of the communication between Coach Ford and Coach Roof, is that we have the smart speed timing gates, and so Coach Roof will actually take those out to the track, and they'll time the athletes 10-yard flies, and so they'll do that. I think they do that twice a semester. We just finished up doing that and kind of seeing how they progress over the course of the semester, and kind of like he has data going back from like 8 years, so or 4 years. So he kind of compares it throughout their some of these kids' entire careers. And then he'll also use the view motion It's kind of like this new kind of AI biomechanics kind of video that kind of analyzes it, kind of the different symmetry between the leg or between the body and your legs and your arms, and so it's very interesting. It's definitely kind of still in the works. It's not, maybe the best thing right now, but I mean, it's definitely another tool that we can use.
When you guys do, and then I am going to finish up with asking you about like perch and force decks and stuff like that. But when you
Yeah.
guys use the timing gates and you're doing 10-yard fly, are you guys doing 10-yard flies or 10-meter flies? First of all,
10-meter flies for track, 10-yard flies for acro in
okay.
baseball.
And then what
Yeah,
distances are they using
iPad.
for buildups? Obviously, track might be doing a longer buildup, like a longer run in. A&T probably not that long, and then baseball somewhere in between. Are they doing all the same?
So, yeah. No, so, track will do 20-yard buildup. They'll do their, I guess, their 30-meter dash, and so they'll get that last 10 meters, and then,
So the
for,
same thing we were doing, the same thing we
ac
do at Fairmont, then basically.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and then, for acro and baseball, it's a standing start. So they'll just time the first 10 meters, um, you know, baseball usually do it on the field, track does it in our indoor turf, in our football weight room, and so, they'll do that probably once a week. We'll get numbers on them, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, and then so go ahead and like kind of give us, because I know you were telling me you were working with Perch a little bit. Kind of give us your rundown, your experience, pros, cons, good, bad, ugly, and then how teams, like how the coaches are actually utilizing like things like Perch and Force Decks and any other sports science stuff that you guys are utilizing.
Absolutely. So probably one of the biggest ones that we use, or at least that I've been around, is mainly perch. I mean, we use that pretty much daily. And so basically it's this, I don't really know how to explain it. It's, I guess, this, what would you want to call it? Laser motion sensor atom kind of on
It's
top of the
camera. It's
rack.
it's camera. It's like a high speed camera that
Yeah.
measures bar velocity,
Yeah.
movement, athlete velocity. Like it pretty much can measure the velocity of pretty much every exercise that you could do in a squat rack, essentially. But yeah, it uses a camera actually, so I'm pretty sure it actually records
Yeah.
the actual reps as well, like visually with a camera, and then calculates the equations off of it. So it's kind of like video
Yeah.
analysis to an extent and velocity based training as well. So, but yeah,
Excuse me.
how do you guys use it?
But so yeah, we use that mainly with track and acro. Um, we'll get that set up for them. Basically, just kind of plug it into a little battery. You got the iPad set up right on the rack, so everybody can see it, both the coaches and athletes. And I mean, it will use it mainly for cleans, snatches, and then we've recently just started using it for back squat for our track athletes. And so typically, it kind of started out at the beginning of the semester when we first started using it as just kind of as a tool to see, okay, where are they at? You know, so that they can also see a number and see some feedback and kind of, whether it's compete against each other, compete against themselves. And also, um, we haven't really used the video component of it, but there you do have the entire history of what that athlete has done, and it'll show you like the exercise and the weight. And so, especially some of the upperclassmen who are a little bit more knowledgeable, they kind of understand like, hey, I'm not going to hit a PR every single time. They're like, hey, like I did move this weight faster than I did, a month ago or something like that. So they're pretty good about that. And then, kind of for us, as we kind of went more and more into the semester, it was a good feedback tool for us in real time. So, if it was, we had a couple coaches sets for cleans, and all of a sudden I just kind of see that peak velocity go down, down, and down every single time. I'm like, yeah, you're not going up. You're staying there basically for the rest of the session. You got two more sets, like you're staying here. Like you're obviously pretty fatigued, and most of the athletes do pretty well with that. The other thing too is the only athletes that use it are the upperclassmen. None of the freshmen or the transfers in on track and field and A&T do not use perch at all. So it's definitely a older train age and definitely some more mature athletes that are using this that aren't going to try to like fight you as much. Maybe some still do because they're them and that's what they want to do. They always want to pick a fight. But I mean, for the most part, it is some of the more mature athletes. And so, and then right before we went on break, as far as our squats go, um, you know, we kind of we wanted to kind of dip into that kind of strength speed range. Like, hey, like an athlete's not allowed to go up until they hit like point 0.7 on their max velocity for their back squat. And so, on one hand, it's a good indicator for us to kind of see, okay, where are they at? It's a good way for them to compete. And then it's also kind of, a definitive, hey, like they might say they're good or they want to go up, and it's like, dude, you just hit 0.55. Like, move the bar faster if you want to go up. Like, you can't argue with me today. Like, there's actual proof that, hey, you need to stay here. So, I mean, it's definitely a nice tool. We use it pretty much with everybody. Um, as far as kind of, I guess, like a other than that one time with track and field when it was like, hey, we want to hit this like strength speed where we want to hit like point 0.5, 0.75 in there for some of our last sets. Other than that, we really haven't used kind of like percentages of that like with any other teams or any time throughout the semester. So we'll kind of see here going into the second semester, just because all the teams that I work with were mainly during their off season, and so now everybody's transitioning to in season basically in the start of February. We'll have baseball games, acro and tumbling meets, and then equestrian will start up, of course, and then track and field actually has I think about 2 3 weeks here they'll have their first indoor meet. So yeah,
Yeah, it
so
will
it's
be
coming up
interesting to kind of
fast.
it would be interesting to kind of see how if they're utilizing it more because of just the auto regulation aspect of it in the spring versus in the fall when you're really more or less just trying to either reintroduce everybody back to some of these main movements and or just focus on just strength and bar speed might not be at the forefront because auto regulation is not at the forefront at that point in time. So what the other thing that I was going to kind of go into as we're kind of getting short on time here, because I definitely would, I think we could talk more about sports science. Just give us real quick to answer this before I move on. What other things are you guys using? You guys using force plates? You guys using anything else like heart rate variability or
So
anything
yeah,
like
we're
that?
using yeah. So we're using the force decks, and with that we usually measure RSI mod, impulse momentum, and then basically limb asymmetry. We basically right now as a staff, my mentor Michael Winger, he's doing kind of a presentation on that more on kind of some of the more other things that you can kind of measure and maybe how they can actually affect sports performance. Um, it's kind of like rate of force development and eccentric rate of force development and kind of breaking it down. And I can't go into detail as much as he does, but there's definitely a lot of stuff that you can measure there, and it definitely that's definitely a whole nother conversation that we could kind of have there as far as readiness and helping out with performance. But the other kind of sports science tool that we use is probably the Nord board. I know WVU has one, but basically it's just put your ankles onto these like little hooks. It's like a board, it's flat, and we do a Nordic. So they're going as slow down as they can, trying to hold the position or trying to be upright as possible, going down as low as they can before kind of giving way. And that basically you're just measuring peak force there and basically limb asymmetry. And then we will also do a prone ISO on that. So the athlete will lay flat, and then you'll tell them go, and then they'll try to curl up as much as they can, keeping their back flat the entire time, basically trying to like break those hooks off. And so again, that's just measuring peak force and limb asymmetry there. So and I think probably out of those two, I mean, we used the most data we've used is from the Nord board, and how we've noticed like there's several of our track athletes who are maybe a little bit more, right hamstring dominant than their left hamstring. And so we were trying to kind of find ways on, hey, like what's a better way that we can kind of, maybe make them more more balanced because we're 16 weeks in and some people aren't improving as much as we'd like. So I mean it's definitely been a tool that's helped us with like feedback. I'd say probably the most, besides perch.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm definitely, again, stuff that I've like the Yankees had in the Nord boards. and the fourth and the fourth coach when I was there, and it was something that they were just kind of starting to dip their toe in the water with it as well. All cool stuff that, again, unfortunately we don't have. But what I've always said is the fact that we don't have it, we just need to be better at actually coaching everything instead of worrying about the sports science that we don't have. And maybe we will at some day
100%.
have it. So, and that kind of honestly that brings us perfectly kind of segue because of just the idea of coaching. So, my first question here for you in terms of coaching development is like, what things did you have? What things did you struggle with as a young coach? Like, what things at GCU, and then at the NAIA school that you helped out with in Arizona, and then coming to Fairmont, and then now at Baylor. Like, what's some of the things that you struggle with, and things that you feel like you've had to make the biggest strides and improvements on?
I think for and I think like most it's kind of like several strength or young strength coaches that we've had interns here at Baylor. I mean, it's the kind of paralysis of decision, right? I think probably I forget who said it, but one of the worst decision you can kind of make is no decision at all. And so it's kind of being, deer in the headlights, stuck there. I mean, it happens to everybody. But obviously it's like you gotta have confidence in yourself. You gotta be able, that was one thing I definitely struggled in. I was like, what the heck am I doing? You know, you're trying to be the best strength coach in the world. You're trying to be the next Tommy Moffitt, but I mean, you're just not going to be that. And so it's just remembering you got to be the best coach that you can be. You can't be like any of your previous coaches or any of the coaches that you kind of admire. You got to be 100% you. And so that's definitely 100% one of the things that I struggled with. Um, but I think just kind of getting older, maturing more, being around more people, it's like number one thing, you got to be yourself. Um, and being at different places and seeing different coaches, I mean, has definitely helped a whole lot with that. I mean, being at different levels, from dealing with snot-nosed high school kids to now at Baylor, I mean, we got some pros that come back and work, and so it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that when we talked to Ryan Yeager, he kind of said the same thing. Chandler said the same thing in terms of just like, just being you, being the best version of yourself first and foremost as a coach instead of trying to be somebody else. I think that's 100% true. And I guess I struggled with that too early in my career. Um, what do you think, in terms of kind of on top of that, like just like from a knowledge standpoint, what are maybe some things that, not just coaching wise and personality wise, but what maybe some knowledge things that you thought like when you were coming out of college and you were getting your CSCS? And like I said, everybody thinks the CSCS is the kind of their golden ticket, but it really doesn't mean that you have a fucking clue how to coach. It just means that you know what the textbook says and you know how to take a test. Um, and again, I thought the same stuff, and I had to learn real quick that I didn't know as much about coaching and programming and you know human relationships as what I thought I did. What's some things maybe from a knowledge or experience standpoint that you think have been the biggest like things that help you the most? Like what, is it actually other than coaching? Number one, that should be the answer for everybody is just coaching more hours. But is it, do you think reading? Is it watching videos? Is it, just having discussions with other coaches, sport coaches? Like what are some other things that you feel like has really helped you kind of progress?
100%. I mean, that's a great question. Um, I'd probably say just trying to consume as much knowledge as possible. I mean, podcasts, you know, communicating with other coaches and your peers, um, trying to read as much as you can, trying to not only read about strength and conditioning, like that's all great, but trying to make sure you branch out into kind of other things, whether, that's kind of a hobby you have or about leadership or certain kind of maybe um, sports kind of character or some sort of leader out there that you're kind of more interested in and kind of seeing how the way they think and the way they kind of operate. Because I think, leadership and hard work kind of transcend kind of every generation, every single profession. I mean, those are two things no matter what if you decide to stay in this field or not. I mean, those are two things that are definitely going to get you, to be successful, whatever you do next. And then as far as kind of, you mentioned kind of in the beginning there about kind of, other things besides kind of like coaching when it kind of comes to athletes. And I think this is from How to Win Friends and Influence People, I believe. I know somebody quoted it's a quote from somebody, but how most powerful thing is a name. And I've kind of noticed that everywhere that I've been, that if you learn names really quickly, like that athlete is going to buy in 110%. Um, So I mean, that's going on the roster beforehand and kind of looking, okay, like who's coming in, and not to say that you have to memorize them, but I mean, if you can kind of get a feel for some of the names on the team and know kind of like, okay, where's this team coming from? Are they coming from, super bad season or successful season? And what does that look like for each individual team, or just kind of doing your due diligence and finding just that little bit extra about that team that you can. I mean, that's gonna go a long way. And especially again, like the name is the most powerful thing. If you could, like day one, day two, if you can get somebody's name right, I mean, they're gonna be instantly bought into you. And it sounds super simple and super like what the heck? But no, like wherever you go, I mean, coaching, not coaching, whatever it may be, learning your coworkers' names, learning, whoever you're gonna be in charge of their name, I mean, that's gonna go a very long way. So that's definitely helped me at Fairmont and Baylor a whole lot. I'd probably say that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's something. Again, it is from How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie's book. Which was the crazy thing is that book was written in like the 1930s or 40s or something
Yeah,
crazy like that, a long, long
yeah,
time ago. And it's a book about business, but that's what it says. And I think his quote is, "The hearing your name is like the sweetest sound that a human can hear," because it's like your name is the one thing that you like. It's part of your identity. It's like you own it. It's like rooted to like the core of you as a being. So instead of me going up to Javi and yelling at him because his squat sucks. Like if I go up to him and say, Javi, hey, you might need to work on this a little bit more with your squat. Like that's gonna have a lot more impact than just yelling at him from across the room. And again, there's times where we need to yell at somebody across the room, but getting to know our athletes and I think that's a big thing. And I do that all the time. And I think it's something that, and even when you guys were, and we're gonna talk about this here in a second too, Javi, even when you guys were applying for jobs, like you and Daniel, I told you guys like look up every single person in that athletic department and see if there's anybody that that you have some sort of relationship with, or anybody that that 6 degrees of separation. Is there anybody that is at Baylor that was at WVU or at Grand Canyon or wherever at some point that somehow you have ties to them? Because see if that's going to help you get your foot in the door to have that opportunity. So that's kind of the next thing I was going to ask you is what do you think, in terms, because I know when you were applying for all these positions, nothing seemed like it was happening, and then all of a sudden it's almost like you had two or three offers at different points or like from different schools all at the same time at the end, and you ended up having to kind of actually make like a tough decision, which is a good situation to be in. But what do you think it was? Like I don't know if you've talked to Coach Roof about it or not, but what do you think it is that kind of made you, marketable? What made you like, a good hire? What kind of interview things that you thought went well? Essentially, like why did you get hired? Like, that's that. Like how can you help the coaches I have now? How can you help them like be in a better position to be, somebody that wants to get hired by somebody else?
100%. So right off the bat, I'll just start with saying I think I ended up applying about 80 something jobs over the course of the summer, around those lines. And I didn't get a job offer. I think I started applying in probably April and didn't get a job offer until August. So it is a long competitive process that I mean it's just the way it is. I hope all of you guys get a job offer in April or May and you don't have to stress about it all over summer, but I mean, it can happen and I mean it does kind of work out for the, better or worse. I mean, if no matter how long it takes. But no, I mean, I did talk to Coach Roof, and that was kind of as we got more comfortable. I was kind of, I just asked him, like, "Hey, why did you hire me? Like, what the heck made me stand out? Getting this position?" And he told me, I don't know what you told them, Adam, but basically, when I went down for when I had my interview with Baylor, he originally had said, Coach Roof has said, "Hey, like, here's a Zoom link. We can, do it at, I think it was like 8 or 9 in the morning or whatever." And, I responded, I think this was like at 6 o'clock at night. And I was like, "Hey, I'm actually living in Austin right now. Can I come down to Waco and can we just do the interview in person?" Like, I would much prefer that than having to do another Zoom interview. And he's like, "Absolutely. Like, come down, we'll have the interview at 8 a.m. tomorrow." And I was like, "Cool." So got that squared away, and then he just kind of told me, he's like, "Don't come dressed up. Come in, shorts, plain t-shirt. You can come and lift with me and the staff after." I was like, "That sounds awesome." So I was like, "Okay." So drove down to Waco, it's about a 2-hour drive. Got there. Interviews basically your run of the mill interview. What everybody says. What are your pillars? What is your coaching philosophy? Then they always like to throw a random one in there. What's your ideal cup of coffee? So I would probably say the majority, the interviews that I had are like 99% of the same that you're kind of going to encounter. Um, but interview went pretty well. Went to another weight room and got to actually meet the staff, shake their hand, get to know them a little bit, and then I think it was great that we got to live together. I mean, it definitely made it a little bit less stressful, and everyone was definitely a little bit more laid back and like actually kind of getting to talking to everybody. Um, But I mean, when I asked him like, "Hey, why did you hire me?" He's like, "Because you came down." He's like, as soon as you ask, "Hey, can we do it in person?" He's like, "I wanted to hire you right then and there." And so, I would probably say to you guys, hey, if you have the opportunity to kind of, do that or be in person or kind of, go that little bit of an extra mile or, just kind of do something a little bit extra. I mean, it's going to go a long way in their eyes. Um, and just staying kind of, I know I've kind of talked about, looking at the rosters and looking at the teams, just kind of doing, the history of kind of that program and, again, if there's anyone that's been there before and kind of anywhere you can kind of tie it back into you or your kind of experience. So, definitely do your homework, do your due diligence and try to, be the best employee that you can.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because that's my first basically three out of my first four positions were exactly kind of happened like that, and two of them I kind of just they made a position for me to an extent because I was just so I wouldn't just leave them. I honestly just wouldn't leave them the fuck alone. I was just being relentless about it. At WVU, I
I've
probably
got
sent
that
my
right now. Yeah.
I probably sent my resume to Mike and Daryl 20 different times. Never heard anything back. Was saying something to one of my professors who actually happened to live next door to the basketball strength coach, and I was telling him how frustrated I was, and he actually talked to the basketball strength coach one day, like in their driveway, and was like, "Hey," he's like, "I got this kid wants to intern." Literally, that guy called the football strength coach. They brought me in for the interview, and I've talked to some of you guys about how that interview process went because there was a physical interview. But there's just and they told me like when they brought me in, they were like, "Look, we're not looking for any interns right now, any new interns right now. There, but you just wouldn't leave us the hell alone. So we just want to at least give you a chance and see kind of what you have to offer." And then when we moved to Florida, I was already working at a private gym down there, and I reached out to University of Tampa and I asked them if they were offering any like any extra like GA positions, even though I'd already had my master's degree, any like paid internship positions or anything like that. And the guy said no. And I was like, well, can I just come in and we can just chat and talk about training? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So we ended up probably talking for like an hour. And by the time we were getting, he's like, I gotta go lead a training session. He's like, I don't have anything 100% to offer you right now. He said, but I can tell that you want to be here. He's like, so just come back in on Monday. And at that point in time, then I basically was, a volunteer strength coach for basketball and softball. There's another sport I worked with too. I forget what other team it was, but basically, volleyball, I think it was. So it's like one of those things where I basically like force their hand to be like, look, this person's just not going to leave us alone. And then the exact same thing happened the next year with the Yankees. They didn't have any internships or anything like that they offered. I went and met with their minor league coordinator. And he told me come in, talk to me, let's see how things go. I talked to him for like 2 hours. All the other strength coaches were kind of bouncing in and out. They'd all ask me some questions, and they could just tell like I was just you guys know this. I kind of wear my emotions like on my sleeve to an extent, and kind of like just love to talk about training and just being very very like high strung to an extent. And at the end of the day, he was like, look, I don't have anything that we can offer you. He said, but you can keep coming in, keep shadowing with us. He's like, I don't like internships, so we're not going to call it an internship. There's no official agreement. If you want to stop coming, you can stop coming. I basically went there that entire part of that extended spring training. The next year, he called me at the end of the fall baseball, and he was like, look, next spring, he's like, we're creating a position for you. We're going to give you a part-time, it's basically the pay of an internship position, but it's going to be a part-time assistant minor league strength conditioning coach because we just want you around because you're just fucking hardworking and you're gonna show up and we know you're gonna do a good job. So it's just to me again, it's like I think that's all stuff that again just I don't know if you can teach that mentality. Like again, that's something like I just have, and I think that's something but just taking that initiative, like Javi said, like taking that extra step.
Yeah.
If you listen to all these old string coaches, like before the internet was around, like that's what all these old string coaches did. They didn't have Zoom, they didn't have the internet to like be able to email each other. They would literally call each other on the phone or get in a car and drive across the country to go to Westside Barbell to watch Louis Simmons train powerlifters so that they could go back and train their football team back in California. Like it's just something that again, I think it's kind of a lost art in terms of just everybody wants to do these virtual meetings and all this fake stuff. But getting in front of people is honestly something extremely important. So that's kind of my follow up rant on that. Um, does anybody else have any questions for Javi before we let him go? Honestly, I thought there was a lot of good information there. So what do you guys have?
I got one. So working with like just the athletes at Fairmont, and even I think with that JUCO that you were at, and now at Baylor, like what are the biggest differences you see in just like the way athletes move and like how quickly the athletes at Baylor can pick stuff up? Like, is there a significant difference there? Obviously, I know maybe like acro, they probably pick stuff up pretty fast. I don't know how equestrian does, but what are the differences that you see there?
Can their catchers throw people out from their knees?
That's a great question.
Oh, yes, they can. Yes, they can. No, that's a good question, Mr. Haskins. I would say, being NAI D2, D1, some of the biggest differences are maturity. Um, I think the most amount of mature athletes are at Baylor. You still have your knuckleheads that drive you crazy. You still have your stereotypical freshmen that you're like, Jesus, how did you make it this far in life? But the athletes, I've kind of seen that more and more kind of, getting to, at the D1 level. I'd also say that kind of foundation of, I guess you want to say, you know, giftedness or athletic performance, that kind of foundation is a little bit higher at Baylor. And you got more kids that are just, the foundation is higher and they're just an extremely hard worker. And you just combine those two together and they're just, an absolute monster. And so I wouldn't say, Arizona Christian, I mean, we had athletes that were just like that, if not maybe even a little bit better. It's just, there's more of them at Baylor, I would say. And like easily, I mean, there are plenty of Fairmont athletes that, at least in the weight room and, sprinting wise as well, I could absolutely hang with some of the Baylor athletes. It was just, I would just say there's more of them. There's more of a pool at them at Baylor. And just for some teams, I mean, there's just, just some straight up absolute inhumane athletes, especially on that acro team. We'll leave it at that. So, yeah. If yeah, go check out Baylor's TikTok if you can. Some pretty impressive lifts. So
Anybody else have any questions?
I was gonna go ahead if we had time. So Javi, going from say like Fairmont to Baylor, what's the biggest thing that you've taken away either from reading the CSCS textbook or the quadrant system or just learning from Adam personally that has helped you the most, like since you've been at Baylor?
great question, Mr. Colton. I would probably say probably two things. One more on the academic side, one more on the coaching side. Is number one is you always relate it back to kind of your fundamental human movements. Those are going to kind of transcend wherever you go. Those are always going to kind of be there. And number two, as far as the coaching side, I mean, it's always trying to be on your toes and always trying to be doing something. My worst fear in the world is to be sitting down. So I mean, that's something that transcends from Fairmont and all these levels, and something that everybody's going to recognize. And so, I would just say, just being a hard worker, going the extra mile, taking pride in being a strength coach and being a professional. Um, I think one of the big things, I know Adam always says, and I'm sure tells you guys all the time. It's like, hey, like you don't get that job and then start working hard. You're working hard like no matter what your job title is. And so it's very, very important that you kind of keep that same mentality wherever you go. Adam says it a lot better than me, but yeah.
No, I think that's good. And again, that's also something that as we've asked these questions on the first three interviews and including this one, like that's something that everybody's kind of general theme is just like work really hard at the position that you're at. And that goes back to that very first or second week of the internship program that you guys all did. Javier, I know you kind of did it remotely before you started your GA, but you know, that Megan Young video that I send you guys all that's part of that internship development packet is, you know, the best job that you've ever had is the one that you have right now. Like make the most of that. Like that's the most important job that you can have. I think Ryan Yeager was saying it, like keeping your head where your feet are at, you know, not thinking about what the next job is going to look like, not thinking about, oh, I can't wait to be here. When I used to work at this place that I liked better, like, no, just coach the place that you're at now and kind of let the chips fall where they may. That's all I got. Everybody don't leave because I'm gonna stop recording it here in a second. But I do have another question to ask, but I don't necessarily want this to be on the recording. So, so that's all I got, Javi. I appreciate it.
Oh Lord,
Awesome.
okay. Of course.
It's awesome that you're killing it, and we'll maybe have to do this again at the end of the spring semester, or if you make the trip out here for NCATA nationals, we'll get to see you, and looking forward to that. So. Best of luck and
100%. We're coming for number 9, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. We're going for number 1. We got to make it there first.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's true. Yeah.
All right, appreciate it.
Yeah. Of course.